I grew up in a small community in West Texas called Roscoe. How small? I'd like to show you my first girlfriend's high school class. She was the valedictorian. This guy was the salutatorian. He had to get special permission to get accepted to the University of Texas because he wasn't in the top 25% of his class. And this was the rest of the class. So Roscoe was extremely small, the kind of small where everyone personally knew everyone else and their parents, and oftentimes their grandparents. My grandfather on my mother's side was a man named Willis Davis, and most of the people in the community called him Dandy. And besides being a noted rattlesnake hunter, the snake in this picture is nearly 7 feet long. Dandy owned the International Harvester dealership in the nearby town of Sweetwater. Now, a harvester is a pretty big investment. Tens of thousands of dollars when I was growing up, and hundreds of thousands of dollars today. And my mother told me that on many occasions, she saw my grandfather sell one of those harvesters on nothing but a handshake. A local farmer would walk into the dealership and he would drive off in one of these harvesters, and sometimes he wouldn't write a check or even sign anything. And my grandfather knew he was going to get paid. It wasn't even a question in his mind. Now, obviously, that's not how big transactions work for most of us today. We sign contracts, we negotiate hard, we make big down payments, and we take on high-interest loans. And all of this is designed to help mitigate some of the risks associated with doing business with people that we don't know or trust all that much. So what was going on in small-town West Texas that made people there not have to worry about this stuff all that much? It wasn't that everyone was honest or that people there were inherently somehow better than people elsewhere. But Roscoe had a population of only about 1,200. Everyone knew everyone else's reputation. And if someone treated you poorly, it was known almost instantly throughout the community. So if someone had driven off with one of my grandfather's harvesters and never paid him, there would have been tremendous consequences. And not just legal consequences, or a fear that he might come after them with some giant 7-foot rattlesnake. But something much, much worse. A permanent loss of the community's trust. So it would be easy to mistake this for some kind of heartwarming anecdote about how small-town America is such a great place. I should probably point out that I packed my bags and left Roscoe for the big city within hours of graduating from high school. But Roscoe has something to teach us about economies and how we can make them more robust and beneficial for everyone. So even if we don't buy harvesters on a handshake, an awful lot of what we do on a daily basis does rely upon trust. Take your food. We eat many things every day that have been grown, processed, packed, shipped, and oftentimes prepared by people we don't know. When you grab a takeout order from your local restaurant, you may be putting your health in the hands of some kid who's looking to get famous on the internet. But we do that. And we give our credit card numbers to people. And we let doctors tell us to take expensive medication with really weird side effects. And most of the time, trusting people we don't know works out okay for us. Despite how terrible the nightly news can sometimes look, and how terrible this guy looks, we in America live in a society with a really high level of implicit day-to-day trust. And this trust has powerful implications. According to an international social study called the World Values Survey, they have similar levels of trust in Scandinavian countries and in places like Germany, Japan, and England. Now, these high-trust countries are some of the most powerful economies in the world. Would you care to take a guess where there's the lowest levels of trust? Try Greece, Jordan, Uganda, and Portugal. Now, these are societies that are facing economic and social breakdowns. The political scientist Robert Putnam did a study where he compared almost identical industries in northern and southern Italy, and he found that the lower levels of trust in southern Italy made it really difficult for them to get much done. So what's in northern Italy? Milan and the fashion industry. What's in southern Italy? Sicily and the mafia. So these different levels of trust have such tremendous impacts based on something that I'll call trust efficiencies. When you live in a high-trust society, all kinds of things are faster and easier. You don't have to haggle for hours to make sure that you're getting a fair price. And you don't have to hesitate out of fear that someone may be intentionally selling you a lemon. Trust doesn't just feel good, it makes everything work better. So I'd like to do a quick exercise, audience participation. I want you to choose between a close, trusted contact with someone, possibly someone important in your career field, or a dear friend, and $100 in cash. Which would you take? If you'd rather have the cash, raise your hand. Nobody? What if you could choose between that relationship and $1,000 in cash? Okay. Would you take $10,000? If you could choose between 10 grand and a trusted relationship, raise your hand. Still no one. What about $100,000 in cash? There's some hands. Would you take $1 million? Okay. So I found that this varies just a little bit, but people begin to waver a little bit at $10,000, and most flip to the cash at $100,000 or $1 million. And what this means is that based on our intuitive understanding of how the world works, we all consider a single trusted relationship or professional contact to be more valuable than an average year's salary. Trust has been at least that important for me. My company, SavvyCard, has raised most of our early financing through people that know and trust me personally. So let's take that number, an average year's salary per relationship, and if you multiply it even by the population of a small country, you'll begin to see why it's so important that we start thinking about how to foster trust efficiencies in our own society and around the world. So in 2003 or 2004, people began to look at the internet and think about ways that we could use it to turn the world into a bigger version of small-town West Texas. Tim O'Reilly looked at the internet that was developing at that time, and he called it a collective intelligence, a kind of global brain. And O'Reilly called all of this Web 2.0, and he believed that it was going to make all of us more connected, smarter, and more efficient. Actually, a version of this idea dates back to at least the 1960s when Marshall McLuhan looked at things like broadcast television and radio and predicted that they would create a global village where everyone knew, understood, and trusted one another. So ultimately, Web 2.0 did make us way more efficient at choosing restaurants and finding funny pictures of cats. But when you really get down to it, you realize that most people for big transactions, like purchasing real estate or starting a business, rely upon people that they know directly. So services like Angie's List have been trying for years to foster trust efficiencies using the Web 2.0 model, and they've largely failed. If you think about it, aggregated crowd data is just not all that powerful. If a restaurant has a 5-star rating on Angie's List based on 500 glowing reviews, and somebody that I know tells me about their terrible experience that they had there, I probably won't go. Charles Green at the firm Trust Advisors says that trust equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. And Web 2.0 doesn't have all that much credibility. You can easily purchase Facebook likes and positive reviews on Amazon and good position on Angie's List and Twitter followers. It's not even especially difficult or expensive. There's also not that much real intimacy online. You can build trusting relationships over time, but when you're looking at aggregated reviews of a roofing contractor, you lack the personal connection to those reviews that makes them at all meaningful. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to add something to Charles Green's formula. What I think is the most important element of trust that's missing from Web 2.0, and that's accountability. If I go to Yelp and give a restaurant a positive review, and someone goes to that restaurant based upon that review and they get food poisoning, there's pretty much zero impact on me. But if I give you a personal referral to the same restaurant, it's a totally different story, because I'm probably going to hear about your experience the next day at the office. And that referral, good or bad, will personally reflect upon me and impact our relationship. So accountability is the main difference between anonymous reviews and ratings and personal referrals from sources that I know and trust. So these are the shortfalls with how we're trying to capitalize on trust online today. It's not credible, it's not intimate, and there's no real accountability. And this has tremendous consequences for the global economy, because there's something real to the promise that the internet can foster trusting relationships and help society work better. It's happening already in small ways. eBay's ratings, for example, allow me to buy a used power drill from some guy in Sweden with some level of confidence. But when it comes to the relationships that lead to things like creativity and innovation and happiness, these may sometimes start online and be strengthened there, but they almost always come down to direct, intimate contact and familiarity over time to reach their full potential. So maybe the solution to the problem of trust on the internet is finding ways to bridge the gap between the online and the offline worlds. Bill Wasik, a senior editor at Wired, was recently in Tampa talking about the Internet of Things. The idea of using RFID chips to track real-world objects with the same level of detail that we track information. The classic example is the refrigerator that tells you when you're out of milk. But what if instead we created an internet of people? I know, that sounds crazy, right? Because the internet is already made up of people. But it's mainly made up of anonymous, faceless, and nameless people. Of Facebook friends who aren't really our friends. Of message board trolls with usernames like Mr. Mullet 37 desperately trying to sell us Viagra. I have dozens of contacts on LinkedIn who have endorsed me for skills that I know they have no way of knowing that I possess or that I have any expertise in. On the internet of today, there are still very few reasons for people to trust one another. It's an internet of strangers. And villages aren't made up of strangers. A real global village, a true networked trust economy, would have extraordinary benefits. An internet that allowed us to accurately evaluate people in ways that were rich and accurate would allow society to work more like a small town community with less stress, less paperwork, and less friction. Everyone would have more time and a better quality of life. To build this trust economy and reap those benefits, we have to create a system of accountability, a more formal version of the mutual and natural accountability that's found in small town communities and villages. I think in the future we'll all have something that I'm going to call a trust score. It's going to be an aggregate of our interactions with other people with verifiable metrics and publicly available results. Something a little bit like a credit score, but not strictly limited to financial transactions. But instead, it'll include things like the quality of our work, the trustworthiness of our knowledge, and the density of our connections to and referrals from other trustworthy people. In the trust economy, when I refer you to a restaurant, everyone benefits. The restaurant benefits because they get a new customer. You benefit because you get a good meal. And I benefit because my trust score goes up and I become a more visible and valuable member of the global community. Now I know, there's more tracking already in society than many of us would like. But the benefits of the trust economy are so extraordinary that those people that choose to take control of their reputation will have tremendous advantages over those that do not. They'll get better jobs. They'll make more money. They'll build better relationships. They'll find it easier to succeed in almost everything that they do. In a small town community, you exchange anonymity and some amount of privacy for the opportunity to be a part of a community that provides immense support. And for many people, that's not a bad trade-off. Imagine a world where you could be certain that everybody you purchased products or services from was reputable, where you could know that every time you gave money to a charity, it was being run by honest people, where you could expect your professional contacts to constantly refer you business because they knew it would reflect well upon them, and where you could know that people would be personally held accountable for their words and their deeds by the community around them. That's how the world worked for my grandfather in small town West Texas. He sold harvesters on a handshake, and he was able to do that because he lived in a community that valued relationships, personal accountability, and trust more than money. And I don't know about you, but I could enjoy living in a world that's more like that. There were a number of people that contributed to my thoughts on the trust economy, but I'd like to give special thanks to David Z. Morris, who co-wrote this TEDx talk and who also provided his ideas and research on the subject. If I ever needed a reminder that relationships are more valuable than people, I'd have to look no further than David. Thank you for supporting TEDxTampaBay and for sharing this time with me. I trust you've enjoyed it.